The title of this presentation is Feed Cost, Exposing the Elephant in the Room. And there really is an elephant hiding in plain sight, as I hope to explain. As I outlined in the previous video, the percentage of pasture in the cow's diet has a huge impact on the average cost of feed. This table calculates the average cost of feed in South Africa in US dollars for a range of pasture percentages in the diet from 0 to 80%. Regardless of whether the pasture cost has been calculated as a constant industry average or more correctly as a lower cost when pasture is a higher percentage of the diet, there is a huge variation in the average feed cost between low to no pasture, the average cost in South Africa in recent years, and the much lower cost at 60 to 70% pasture in the diet. So how important is feed cost? This table includes total expenses per litre in US cents for 8 countries in the first column, with this then split between feed cost, labour cost, and all other costs in the next 3 columns. The final 3 columns report these 3 cost centres as a percent of total expenses. Feed cost is the largest cost centre by a wide margin for all countries, comprising 40 to 65% of total expenses. South Africa's feed cost is the highest of the pasture-based countries at around 60 to 65% of total expenses, which is our first glimpse of the elephant I mentioned earlier. There is further supporting evidence that the average cost of feed has a huge impact on profit. This graph is from one of my own papers that outlines the impact of average feed cost per tonne dry matter, which is the horizontal axis, on total feed cost per litre, which is the vertical axis. And this second graph now moves total feed cost per litre to the horizontal axis and outlines its impact on total operating expenses per litre. As you can see, both relationships are very strong. The third graph has total operating expenses per litre on the horizontal axis and outlines its impact on profit as determined by return on capital. Again, the relationship is very strong, so the average cost of feed explains most of the variation in feed cost per litre. Feed cost per litre explains most of the variation in total expenses per litre, and total expenses per litre explains most of the variation in profit. As I outlined in the previous video, South Africa has a comparatively high percentage of supplement in the cow's diet, as this graph highlights, and this is resulting in the high feed cost per tonne dry matter and per litre. So if feed cost in South Africa is high and the goal was to reduce the cost, there are 2 methods of accomplishing this. One is to change the mix of feeds using more cheap pasture and less high cost supplement. The other method is to significantly reduce the cost of each of the individual feed components. So for South Africa, let's look at the non-pasture forage cost first. Well, it's already the lowest of the countries listed, so there's little or to no opportunity here. How about concentrates? Well, the cost is about mid-range, but there are unique factors that provide a couple of other countries with their lower cost. And South African pasture is already third lowest, with structural costs like irrigation minimizing the potential to reduce this cost further. But maybe there's no need for farmers to change anything. Cost of production is more than competitive with most other countries, right? Well, that's true, but this is where the potential for future problems with profitability arise. Why? Because South Africa's present competitive cost of production is first and foremost based on very low labour costs, and secondly, very low other non-feed costs. So when we look at total expenses per litre in South Africa and how they compare with other countries, it is easy to decide that all looks good, just as long as we ignore the high comparative cost of feed. But a reasonable person would presume that as the country continues to develop, the labour cost will likely increase to something similar to the more competitive exporting nations. This alone would remove most of South Africa's present competitive advantage. The non-feed costs will likely increase in a similar fashion, and then the country's present competitive advantage would effectively be lost. Now the elephant is clearly visible when it's starting to run amok. But there is a way to slay the elephant and to set individual farms and the entire industry up for an even brighter future than at present. This final option is based on increasing the percentage of pasture in the diet by 16%, from 41% at present to 57%, and it's the subject of a paper I've recently written and submitted for publication. This would reduce cost of production, increase both profit margin and overall profit, opening up a larger advantage for South Africa to all other countries except New Zealand, and significantly closing the gap to New Zealand. We'll be talking a lot more about all of this at the roadshows. I hope to see you there.